You use observability to know why something has gone wrong. So monitoring is tells you what has gone wrong on the dashboard because you know what you want to monitor. And observability is about like getting into the nitty gritty of knowing why things have gone wrong.
Hi everyone, I'm here with Parveen Khan and we're going to be talking about observability today. Parveen, could you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Hey, hi Nicola. Thanks for having me. I'm Parveen Khan and I'm a senior QA consultant currently working at ThoughtWorks.
And let's start with the basics. For someone who knows like nothing about observability, how would you explain what observability is to them?
In simple terms, I think what observability is about knowing your internal working of the system without it's not like you need to know everything, like everything about the code base that you're working on, but then still whenever there's kind of an issues or if you want to find out something about your system, then how well are you able to know the internal working of the system. So with the ability of observability, like knowing the inner workings, that's what in simple terms what observability is. With if you're not going deep into definition, so that's exactly what it means. It's like having visibility, right? It's about like having a little bit using data, having the visibility of the system, having the ability to know not just the knowns of the system but unknowns of the system. That's how I would like to, like I would explain someone who is completely new, like in simple terms, saying that it's all about creating that visibility and using how do you create that visibility using instrumentation and using the data. So that's what it's all about.
Which resources do you recommend people use to start learning about observability?
There are quite few. Like I think when I started, when I was willing to learn about what it is, so I think I tried followed. So I think I could recommend the same. Like so trying to follow some of the thought leaders who talk a lot about observability, following them, I think knowing, like having those conversations, like following those conversations. I think one of them are Charity Majors and Liz Fongs, and these are the few people, and Abby Bangser or Cindy Sridharan. So these are few people whom I try to follow, like on LinkedIn and Twitter or wherever, like and then try to look through the resources. They have their blog post as well. These are the few of the resources, and also listening through the podcast. A few of them, like one of the one that comes into my mind is Ollycast, where it's by Charity Majors who hosts days where she brings in a lot of different thought leaders into observability space and gets them like answering different sharing their experiences. And another podcast is On Call Maybe by Andriana Villela, and so I think even she talks a lot about observability as well. So I think it's just trying to follow these people and follow their blog post, and they try to give the talks and stuff. So I think that's how I try to learn and know more about what it is and how it helps.
Thanks for sharing those bloggers and people in the field and the podcasts. I'll write in the description for listeners so they can tune in. Were there any courses by any chance that you used to learn about observability? And then where could we find those courses?
Yeah, I think when so the thing is like there's no there were courses around how to implement like observability, like from more uh, developer specific material out there. But for me, like being a tester, I think I was trying to look for, like like how is it implemented and what can I take from that and how can I take it back to my team, basically. So I think there were no specific courses, but I can see like there are a couple of courses on Test Automation University by Abby Bangser, like about observability and automation. So that's one of the courses I definitely would highly recommend because it's a combination of like learning about observability and how you can try and implement that into test automation. So that's one of the course, and I think I try to attend few of the workshops by Honeycomb. I as I said, like I used to follow them, right? And I used to follow Honeycomb. A lot of they have a lot of resources. Yeah, this is one of the resources I can definitely recommend. Honeycomb, where you can find a lot of blogs, and they do a lot of workshops as well. So I think I try to attend a workshop just to understand how things work, and I can try to implement little things. So I think try give a follow and try to see if there's any workshops going on Honeycomb. And as I said, work course by Abby Bangser on Test Automation University. These are the couple of things that I would definitely recommend.
Sweet, thank you, and I'll also add those notes. What is Honeycomb, or what does that company do? You've mentioned them a few times in our
Yeah, I
conversation.
think there's this is so when you look at different tools, when you look at like what tools do you want, right? When you're looking at implementing observability, like
Mm.
so there are quite a lot of different tools. So Honeycomb is like one of the tool in the market as well, where they kind of are like using telemetry instrumentation. They kind of have this is kind of an observability tool. Basically, it's kind of like how we had Splunk for different ability, and New Relic, Datadog. These are the different tools. So Honeycomb is one of them as well.
I just want to touch on a few terms that you've used in this conversation. What is telemetry?
If we go back, like when we're thinking about observability, right? We if you think of what it is now, if you think of like how can we, okay, now we know what it is. How can we implement that? How can we have our services, like how can we make our system observable? So that's when it comes into the picture, like, okay, how can I make my system observable? We need instrumentation, right? Some kind of data that we can see that makes our services visible. So that's where the term telemetry comes into the picture, where like it's all about the data. So telemetry and instrumentation is about what type of data, what is the different type of data that you can collect to have your services observable and to implement observability. So yeah, it's all combination of like when I use instrumentation or telemetry, so I'm talking about the data that needs to be used, that needs to be implemented as part of your development cycle.
What are the common misconceptions you've come across regarding observability?
I think one of the most common misconception I've come across, at least, is like, oh, once you have a tool, like once you bring in an observability tool within your team, that's it. Like it means that you have observability in place. So that's one of the misconception I've I've seen, like once you have, like, it's exactly as I think it goes to the same, right, in the quality space. Like when you have a tool for test automation, or when you look at like DevOps, like it's not like once you have Jenkins in place, you're doing continuous integration and continuous deployment, or like just like how you call, or once you have continuous integration, you're doing DevOps. So same thing goes to this kind of misconception, where once you bring in the tool, you're doing observability. It's because it's not about the tool, it's more about the culture and practices that put in places. That's where I feel like this kind of a misconception I see quite a lot in different teams that I have worked on. So this is one of them, and one of them I came across is like um, let's ship the product, like let's have a like MVP of the product, and then let's think about observability later on, because we don't need observability right now because of any kind of reasons. Like we feel like, I've seen this quite a lot, that oh, we don't need this anymore right now because we are very in a very early stage, and we like let's ship this, like let's get into this complete full-fledged release of the product, and then we will think about it. So that's another kind of misconception I feel like, from my opinion, because I think there's no such thing as like, I mean, again, like you can start anytime. There's no right or wrong time. Like it's not like you have to start from the beginning, or it's not like you need to you cannot start once a product is in the middle. So it's there's no such thing as right or wrong time. So I think because this is where I feel like this is one of the misconception. And I just feel like another huge misconception I think a lot of people have heard is like monitoring and observability are same, um, but I think they're both quite different, and they're quite like
What is the difference between the two?
um. So I think when you look at, so when I was talking about observability, right, I was saying like knowing about not just the known
Mm,
knowns but also unknown unknowns, right? And when you look at monitoring,
mm,
um, what are the things that you try to monitor? It's about like you want to know certain state of a system, right? For example, you create a, so like for example you create a dashboard or you create an alert on the back of it. Like for example, you want to know that there are no, as an example, right, you want to monitor a particular service or a part of a system that it doesn't throw a lot of 500 errors. For example, if you're monitoring an API request, for example, you want to know that there's no
mm,
not many 500 errors, or you want to see the CPU utilization. So you're trying to create a dashboard for something that you know, and you want to monitor that basically. So
mm,
you know what you want to
mm,
monitor, and you want to see that if there's anything, if there's something goes wrong, you want to be alerted for that. So that's what monitoring is. But at the same time, observability is about, you don't know, like, it's not like you know where you, like, it's not like you know where you want to look at, like, for example, like, uh you have seen something gone wrong on the dashboard, or you've been got alert for, you use observability to know why something has gone wrong. So monitoring is tells you what has gone wrong on the dashboard because you know what you want to monitor. And observability is about like getting into the nitty gritty of knowing why things have gone wrong. So that's how at least I see the difference. Like, you use observability for the unknown things, like, you don't even know where you want to use, because for example you have some kind of production issue, as an example. It's like it's not just knowing that you have a prod issue, just like how you come to know with monitoring, but using the the ability of observability, like, having the observable, like for example using logs or traces or metrics, digging deeper into the root cause and finding out uh, where the root cause is and knowing how to fix it. So they're completely two different things. So which is why I say like monitoring is about what has gone wrong, and then using that, using observability, getting into depth and finding out why it has gone wrong and how can I fix it.
You mentioned a bit about like saying, oh, let's say there's a production issue, and then you could then dig deeper and look at the logs and the traces. Let's say you were to, because you're a consultant, you said with ThoughtWorks, and you go into a project. How would you be able to tell if, like, by observing, whether or not a team or a project has a problem with observability? Like, what are the symptoms that this aspect is lacking?
I think there are many different approaches to see, right? Like first thing would be like, how um what are the steps does a team take, and how long does it take for a team to figure out where the problem is whenever there is a fraud incident, basically. And I've worked on a team where the whole team was completely new, and none of us had enough knowledge of code base or product itself, basically. One of the sign, like, was there were quite few production issues coming in, like, on a day-to-day basis, because there was a lot to do on that product. So it was not about how many issues we were facing, but it was about each team member. They would spend like days and days to figure out where the problem is, and they would not be able to figure out, like, they would not be able to like find out where the problem is, like, even though there were some logs in place and whatever information that they had. So I think this would be the um, first thing that I would try to notice, observe in the team, like, just joining all those postmortems if they are having, and how long is it for them to take in, how long does each like those team member take to figure out where the root cause is. Forget about fixing the issue itself, but being able to get into the services, knowing where to go. Sometimes a lot of production issues are like, okay, we don't even know where to look, where to start from, right? Because it sometimes feels like trying to find a needle in a complete big haystack, right? So it's all about observing those patterns within the team, saying like how long does it take, and what is the information or what is the data that they are looking for, how many different places are they looking that information for, like, I think this would be one of the thing that I would try to observe, like when I was like working on the team. And the second thing is like trying to see, like, when they are implementing each feature, are they trying to think of what are the logs do we need to add, or what is it like what are the extra things that we need to look for. I think, are they thinking, like, are the team thinking around that stuff? These are the little things that I'll look for, and I'll try to also look for like what are the tools that we have in place, and how many different places that we need to look for the information. So I think these are the few things that we can observe and look for to find out at what stage the teams are in terms of implementing or knowing what observability is within the team, and proactively thinking about observability as part of the feature development.
The funny thing with observability for me is I had been on projects fairly early on in my career where, like, I think years before I discovered it was even a thing, that it was really well set up. And then I struggled when you feel like you're going in blind and you're trying to discover like what the issue is, where things went wrong. Um, and that's and there's still, I honestly, like, I still don't even know what the word for it was. Like, I was just describing the symptoms of not being able to find what the problem is, being like, are these logs are so unhelpful, those sorts of things. And it's interesting because like we're having this conversation and we're tying words to what I'm sure a lot of people might not even realize. This is like this concept that exists, that they now that they know the term, observability, and with you having shared resources to learn more about this concept, then they could hopefully like look into those problems they have in their team going forward. um One thing I want to ask for you about is, how do you go about advocating for observability on a project?
Yeah, I think I think the things that I was mentioning, right? Like about what are the things that you'll observe, to know, like, which where the teams are in terms of observability. So I think that's the best thing to start from. Like, if you see that teams are struggling to find the root cause, or a team in a team, like I've also seen that. Okay, they are solely dependent on a single developer or one or two people because they know a lot about the system and the others don't know a lot about the system. So so like, when you see these kind of patterns, I think that's where you can start, like, thinking like, okay, so I think, when you see a problem, that's where if you try to bring in the solution, like, not the solution, but I can trying to say like, okay, hey, look, what, I think it took so long. So what are the things you need to try to find? So was it hard to find the logs, or was it hard to understand what the logs were, or was it hard to know that there was not enough logs in the place at all? Knowing what is the cause, little, like, trying to spend some time to understand a bit more, knowing the problems, I think, then trying to, I think I've always tried this, um, so far the teams that I've worked on. So just trying to attend those, those calls where people are just swarming to figure out what the root causes for the production issues. I think being on the call there, trying to see what people are doing and what are their pain points, and then taking that back and implementing different things in the ways of working. Like, for example, one of the things that I feel like observability is part of one of the cross-functional requirements, just how we think of as performance testing or security testing. If you think of all these cross-functional, I know these are called as non-functional requirements, but yeah, I like calling them as a cross-functional requirement. It feels more inclusive. So I feel like observability as well is part of one of the cross-functional requirements. So I think thinking So we talk a lot about shifting left, right? We as testers advocate for that, right? For anything that is like, we need to do right for the product. So at the same way, I think I've always approached in the same way of like shifting left. What are the things that you can try to shift left? Asking questions, right? The same thing goes to the observability. Like um, during Three Amigos or when you're kicking off the feature, bringing those questions of, oh yeah, so we are implementing this feature, so do we have, are you going to add any more logs, or do we need any kind of metrics or events during Three Amigos? Because again, it's about having everyone's raising those questions and bringing everyone's perspective into this. When we
Mm.
bring these questions, everyone's like, they try to think from different perspective, and then you start having that input. So that's how I think I kind of try to advocate for it, like, trying to be there and try to keep reminding people and trying to like, as I said, like during Three Amigos or kickoffs, asking these questions early enough so that the devs start thinking about, oh yeah, I need to think about what else do we need to implement, what else do I need to instrument, what are the things, extra things that I need to add. And also asking those questions about, do we need to think about, like, having no PII in this, in the logs, like, like personal information about the users. And also asking these questions of like, okay, we will be having the logs, but do we want to think about what level the logs, different logs are going to be, by pairing with the developers, like, because there are different levels of logs, like error level, info level, or debug level. So it's about like having these conversations early on, and then when, like, whatever you call it as showcase or test checking, again asking those, bringing those questions up and asking people to show what they have done, what is the extra thing that implemented. The best thing is like, I've always done is like, I've paid a lot with the developers whenever we are doing the testing, exploratory testing. And while we pair, like, saying that, oh look, this is what some, when something went wrong, I don't understand what these log means, like, because if someone else is, if it's not understand, like, if I'm not understanding, maybe like someone else may not even understand, because the system is not always used by a specific person, right? When debugging, there might be other people who are using as well. So just being there, just trying to, bring those questions and be there as a, what do you say, like, as a observability champion, and try to keep saying that. I think once you do that, and I think another way I try to do this is by not assuming that everyone knows what it is, and try to tell people, like, just to try to I used to do sessions, like, even it's not like I know everything about observability, but whatever I know, whatever I have learned from, different people, I just bring that back and I share the resources with them. I keep talking about this topic, and how can we and how is it helpful, why is it helpful, like, and how can it reduce time. So I think just, it's just about keep um, sharing the knowledge and keep talking. And I've also found that sometimes you never know who is interested into this space, right? I've always found like, as soon as I started talking about this topic, there was at least one person that used to come to me saying that, hey, you know what, I'm so interested in this, but I'm very newbie. So I used to tell them, like, even I'm completely newbie, so let's learn together and let's try to advocate together. So I think I used to try to get that, allyship, and it was not just me talking about it, but a couple of others. So this way, the whole team used to get invested into it. I also remember, like, one of the project that I was working on. When you're working on cross-functional teams, right? Now is cross-functional team is a thing, basically. So it's not enough to advocate only on the team that you're working on, because um, if, if you think of the bigger picture, right? A product is built up with different cross-functional teams, and if you're advocating and building that observability only on your team, then you're trying to make the system observable only for a particular service that you are responsible for as a team, basically. So I think you need to try to use, as a tester, right? You use your influencing skills and use your advocating skills, and share that knowledge across the different cross-functional teams, so that it's not just leveraged within your team, and you're not building observable system within your services, but also trying to influence other teams as well, because you never know, like who knows.
But then would you start with like getting observability fairly in place with one team and then expanding to others, or would you like go and try and work on everyone at the same time?
What I have tried is like at least try to build some practices within the team first. And if you see that they are working, and if you see the team is completely invested into it, then trying to, like, I think I've always spoke to people saying that, hey, how did this help? We have implemented something new. Like, for example, as an example, I'll give you an example. So when I was talking about like having observability as part of the feature development, right? So we used to have different teams use different tools, right? We used to have this Jira tool where we used to write all those acceptance criteria and stuff. So we used to have a specific section to talk about observability. So that used to be a reminder and a trigger for everyone to think about whenever we are looking at all the acceptance criteria for a feature. We would also talk about observability at that point. So that really worked for our team, because that means that we don't forget, because a lot of time we forget, right? And it's not like I'll be always there. It's about enabling the team, right? How do you enable the team? Finding different ways that work for your team. So that's another thing that worked. Something that worked for your team that you can pick up from the team and just share that across with the team. And there could be different forums, right? Like, as a, maybe if you're doing the lunch and learn session, maybe share that and say this is what we tried and this is what we worked. And because again, when you are not working on the different team, like, you can't just go and say that, hey, you know what, this is how this is what we did, and maybe you should try as well. So you can't just tell them, but you can just try to share what you have done and what worked, and it's up to them. So it's just about sharing, yeah, what worked for your team. So I think that definitely trying what worked for your team and then sharing, and then I think other teams can figure out what works for their team.
One last question I have is you talked a bit about like you mentioned some tools that I kind of thought were like monitoring tools like Splunk and Relic. Do you have any other tools you'd recommend for people who want to tackle observability?
I think there are so many tools that are like, that helps in different purpose. So I think I can not recommend in the sense is like I've used this and I've seen how it works. So it's more of like, trying to see what works for you based on, because it's all about like, what kind of context you are, and what is your it highly depends on, like, your budget and everything. Based on that, you bring in the tool, right? So Splunk, of course, Grafana, Prometheus, and Honeycomb, um, Dynatrace, and New Relic. I've used New Relic as well. So it's about like, these are the different tools. But I think, as I said, right, whatever tool you use, it's about how do you build that practices and ways of working within your team, so people can use that tool instead of like, just bringing that tool in and thinking that it will solve all your problem, but trying to build. Because one thing is like, observability is not like once you get something, once you start something, it's done. We have done our part. It's not like that. It's completely, it's a very continuous process, and it needs it needs continuous improvement as well. So whatever tool you bring in, so these are some of the tools that I've seen, I've worked with, but more than a tool, I think it's about how do you build that, your team's mindset of, what you implement and ways of working. That's more, I think that's more far important than whatever tool you pick.
Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about observability. I've started, like, in my journey, I've started learning a little bit about it. And I had, read some posts by charity majors. But in terms of the conversations I've had, this is the one where I've learned so much because I'm so in the dark in this area of our industry. Is if someone wanted to get in contact with you, how could they go about reaching you? Where and how can they find you?
Yeah, I think I'll be more than happy. Like, I can talk about this topic a lot. Like, you can reach, anyone can reach me out on LinkedIn, or I'm still also available on Twitter or X, whatever you call it as. And yeah, I'm also on Blue Sky. So yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to reach me out. You can ping me, you can DM me.
Okay, then I'll add the links in the description as well. Thanks heaps for your time,
Thank you so
Paveen.
much for having me. Thanks a lot.